There are moments when you hear something 100 times and it feels empty, abstract, almost cliche. And then one day, the same idea returns, unchanged in wording, yet it lands differently. Not because the sentence evolved, but because you did. Truth does not force its way in. It recognizes readiness. An idea can exist in front of you for years without touching you. You can nod at it, even agree with it intellectually. But agreement is not integration. Hearing is not the same as being changed. Something only becomes transformative when your internal structure is prepared to receive it. Identity filters perception. It determines what feels relevant, what feels threatening, what feels trivial. Two people can listen to the same message and walk away with entirely different reactions. One feels seen, the other feels indifferent. It is not about intelligence. It is about timing. Timing shapes meaning more than content does. The mind often believes that information alone creates growth, that exposure equals understanding. But understanding is gated by structure. If an idea destabilizes the current identity too much, it will be rejected. Not because it is false, but because it is disruptive. Dismissal is frequently self-protection. Sarcasm, indifference, skepticism, these can act as shields. When something challenges the narrative you have built about who you are, the ego tightens. It resists reorganization. The discomfort you feel around certain ideas may not be irritation at the idea itself, but at the threat it poses to your structure. The ego's role is continuity. It protects coherence. It prefers stability over expansion. So when an insight suggests that your current identity is incomplete or misaligned, resistance appears. You may label it as unrealistic, overstated, naive. But underneath that label, there is often a subtle recognition. Irritation can signal proximity to truth. Not always, but often enough to notice. If something does not resonate at all, it may simply not be aligned with your stage. But if it unsettles you, if it lingers, that reaction may reflect structural tension. The current identity cannot fully allow it yet. Experience is what softens that structure. Pain expands perception. Collapse rearranges certainty. The lessons that once felt abstract begin to feel personal after consequence. When something ends unexpectedly, when a pattern repeats one too many times, when the strategy that always worked suddenly fails, these moments create openings. Some insights cannot be borrowed. They must be earned. You can intellectually grasp the idea of boundaries long before you feel the necessity of them. You can understand the concept of detachment before you lose something you are overly attached to. Experience gives weight to words. It converts theory into embodiment. Understanding matures through experience, not exposure. There is a psychological stage called readiness. Though it rarely announces itself, it forms slowly, often after structural breakdown, after humility replaces certainty, after the ego has been confronted with its limitations. Transformation tends to follow destabilization. The identity must loosen before insight can enter. Forced awareness does not integrate. You can push yourself to adopt a belief prematurely, but without structural readiness, it remains superficial. It becomes language without depth. It does not alter behavior. You do not force readiness. You arrive at it. And when you arrive, the shift feels calm. There is a moment when something clicks internally. Not dramatic, not euphoric, quiet. The argument inside you stops. The need to defend your position dissolves. The insight feels obvious, almost embarrassingly simple, as if it was always there. This is the gap between hearing and knowing. When you are not ready, you debate, you compare, you resist. When you are ready, you recognize. Awareness replaces argument. There is a silence that follows real understanding. Not because you have nothing to say, but because there is nothing left to prove. When readiness is present, persuasion becomes unnecessary. But not every message lands immediately. Some truths will feel flat today. They may sound reasonable, yet distant. That is not a failure. It is protection. Denial has a function. It preserves stability until instability becomes unavoidable. Existing frameworks provide comfort. They organize your experience. Certainty feels safe. Growth often requires the dismantling of certainty. That dismantling can feel threatening, so the mind delays it. Some truths revisit you later in life. An idea you once dismissed may return years later, and suddenly it feels precise. Not because the idea changed, but because your structure did. Something cracked. Something humbled you. Something expanded your capacity. If this does not make sense today, it may return when the old structure can no longer hold. Timing is internal. It is not about worth, not about intelligence, not about spiritual advancement. Readiness forms through lived consequence and reflection, through subtle collapses and private realizations, through the slow loosening of identity. This is not a judgment. It is an invitation. You are on your own psychological timeline. No insight can be forced into you prematurely. No transformation can be borrowed fully from someone else's experience. When you are ready, you will not need to be convinced. The message will not feel persuasive. It will feel obvious. And when it finally becomes obvious, there is no sense of triumph attached to it. No dramatic revelation, just a quiet rearrangement inside you. The same words that once felt distant now feel intimate. The same idea that once seemed exaggerated now feels almost understated. Recognition replaces resistance. This is how internal timing works. It is not linear. It is not scheduled. It unfolds through lived tension, through contradictions that slowly exhaust you, through patterns that repeat until denial requires more energy than acceptance. There are seasons in which you are not supposed to understand certain things, not because you are incapable, but because understanding them too early would destabilize you without providing integration. The psyche protects its coherence. It does not open all doors at once. When the ego blocks something, it is rarely malicious. It is protective. It senses that accepting the idea would require restructuring, and restructuring is destabilizing. To admit a truth often means admitting that you have outgrown something, or that you misjudged something, or that you must change direction. That kind of admission shakes identity, so the mind may laugh it off, critique it, or dismiss it as simplistic. These reactions can feel intelligent, but sometimes they are shields, and shields are not weaknesses. They are transitional tools. They remain in place until the structure beneath them becomes strong enough to be exposed. There is a specific discomfort that arises when you are near something that matters. It is not loud fear. It is subtle agitation, a slight tightening in the body, a mild defensiveness. You may feel the urge to scroll away, to distract yourself, to argue internally. Discomfort can mean misalignment, but it can also mean proximity. The difference becomes clearer after experience humbles certainty. Pain has a way of widening perception. When something collapses, a relationship, a plan, a belief about yourself, your cognitive filters loosen. Certainty cracks. You become more receptive, not because you want to be, but because rigidity no longer works. There are lessons that only make sense after loss. Boundaries make sense after overextension. Self-respect makes sense after self-betrayal. Detachment makes sense after attachment costs you more than you expected. Before experience, these are concepts. After experience, they are lived. Understanding matures through consequence. Exposure alone does not change you. You can consume endless insights without integrating them. But when life intersects with insight, something different happens. The words attach to memory, to emotion, to embodied experience, and that fusion creates receptivity. Readiness is not enthusiasm. It is humility. It is the quiet admission that your previous framework no longer explains your reality. It is the recognition that certainty has limits. It is the softening that happens after being proven wrong by life in ways you cannot deny. Identity must loosen before insight can enter. When identity is rigid, information bounces off. When identity softens even slightly, information can settle. This softening often follows breakdown, not catastrophic breakdown necessarily, sometimes just accumulated friction, repeated disappointment, patterns that fail to produce the outcomes they once did. You do not schedule readiness. You grow into it, and when you grow into it, the shift feels almost anticlimactic. The insight that once required debate now feels obvious. You do not feel the need to argue or defend or convince anyone else. The internal tension dissolves into clarity. Recognition feels calm. It is not fireworks. It is not an adrenaline rush. It is more like a door quietly unlocking from the inside. You realize that you have crossed into a new level of perception without dramatic ceremony. The argument ends because it no longer has fuel. When awareness replaces argument, silence follows. A settled silence, the kind that does not demand validation. This is why some messages may not resonate today. It is not an insult to your intelligence. It is not a failure of openness. It is simply that your current structure may still serve you, and until it cracks, it will defend itself. Denial protects stability. Stability feels necessary until it becomes restrictive. Certainty can delay growth because it reduces curiosity. When you believe you already know, you do not question. And when you do not question, you do not expand. But certainty eventually encounters contradiction. Life introduces variables that do not fit the model. When that happens, readiness accelerates. You may recall ideas you once dismissed and suddenly see them differently. You may remember advice you ignored and recognize its relevance. The message did not change. You did. Timing is internal architecture shifting. It has nothing to do with superiority, hierarchy, or worth. Every person moves through stages at their own pace. Collapse and reflection create readiness. Reflection without collapse may create insight. Collapse without reflection may create repetition. But together, they create maturation. This is not a judgment of where you are. It is an invitation to trust your timeline. If something resonates deeply, it is because your internal structure has space for it. If something does not, it may return later. Some truths circle back when the old identity can no longer sustain itself. There is relief in recognizing that you do not have to force awareness. You do not have to rush transformation. Forcing it often creates a superficial version of change that collapses under pressure. When you are ready, the message will not feel like persuasion. It will feel like confirmation. You will not need it explained in detail. You will not need evidence piled on top of evidence. It will land softly and settle quickly. And if it does not land now, that is not rejection. It is timing. You are not behind. You are not resistant in a moral sense. You are simply moving through stages that cannot be skipped. One day, perhaps unexpectedly, something that once sounded distant will feel precise. And in that moment, there will be no drama, no sense of having been converted, only recognition. You will not need the message to insist, because you will already understand. And there is something else that happens after recognition. Once a truth truly settles inside you, it does not create urgency. It creates steadiness. You do not feel the need to announce it. You do not feel compelled to immediately restructure your entire life. Instead, there is a quiet internal alignment, a recalibration. The shift is subtle but undeniable. Certain conversations no longer tempt you into debate. Certain environments no longer confuse you. You see more clearly what fits and what does not. Not because someone convinced you, but because something inside you rearranged. This is how internal timing protects your growth. If insight arrived before your structure could hold it, it would create fragmentation. You would attempt to live from an idea that your nervous system does not yet embody. That gap creates tension, and tension, if too large, collapses under pressure. So the psyche unfolds gradually. You're allowed to not understand something yet. You're allowed to reject what does not feel aligned, and you are allowed to revisit it later without shame. Growth is not a straight line of constant agreement. It is a spiral. You encounter similar truths at different depths. There is humility in recognizing that you once dismissed something that now feels obvious. But that humility is not humiliation. It is expansion. It signals that your capacity increased. And when capacity increases, perception follows. You begin to see that not every message is meant for every stage. Some ideas are seeds. They sit in the background of your awareness for years. Then one experience, one collapse, one loss, one unexpected shift cracks the soil. And suddenly what was dormant begins to make sense. This is not coincidence. It is psychological ripening. When you are ready, you will not need someone to persuade you. You will not need endless examples or elaborate explanations. The message will feel like it was already forming inside you, as if the words simply gave shape to something you had been sensing quietly. And if this is landing for you right now, pause for a moment and comment, "I'm ready." Not for anyone else, but as a quiet acknowledgement to yourself. And that is the difference between external influence and internal recognition. External influence pushes. Internal recognition settles. If this resonates deeply, it is because your structure has space for it now. If it does not, that space may still be forming. Either way, nothing is wrong. Nothing is behind schedule. Truth does not chase you. It waits until you can hold it. And when you can, It does not feel like something new entering your life. It feels like something old finally being understood.